Okay. Hello, my dears. Sorry, took a little bit longer than usual. Mostly because I'm trying to hold a dog at bay with one hand who keeps walking through my cables. Good evening. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever in this wide world you happen to be. I'm Tad. I will be here till about an hour from now. It is 7:01 here in California, where we are between rainstorms, at least in this part of California. So no complaint there, which means the power is likely to stay on since we haven't lost it so far, and we had much, much heavier storms last night. What else do I want to talk about? Just stuff as per usual. Dogs in varying states of discontent with the status quo. They are waiting for Deb to come back. I don't know what that will actually do for them except make them feel more existentially at peace. But be aware, there will be probable sudden crashes and bangs, either in doggy protest on the other side of the room or perhaps a dog walking through my wires here on this side of the room. Don't take it personally. It's just dog business. Johnny is right here under my arm wanting attention. And Johnny, I'm doing something right now, sweetie. It's good to see you. Yes, of course. It's always a pleasure. Anyway, so tonight we finished the Sleeping Late on Judgment Day last night, or earlier today, depending on what part of the world you're in. And which was kind of cool. That's the first time I've read an entire series all the way through. And today I thought I would start something quite a bit different, although still with some Tad relevance. And that is, namely, we are going to, or I am going to, read Through the Looking Glass. This is the annotated Alice, and I probably will from time to time venture into it to, if I see a note that looks particularly interesting. It's absolutely chock-a-block with notes and footnotes and explanations and all kinds of stuff, many of which they're too long and too abstruse to share. But as you probably know, if you're a regular reader of mine, I have a great deep fondness for not only the Wonderland books in general, but specifically Through the Looking Glass. And I will explain as I go along, but that is, of course, a fairly major component of, I think it's the first book or second book of the Otherland series. That is one of the virtual worlds that the character Paul Jonas is stuck in, and at a time when he does not know that he is in a virtual environment. He is still reeling from the shock of having been in the First World War and surviving a direct hit and climbing a giant beanstalk type tree that took him up to the home of a giant, and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, and he winds up in a looking glass world, one of the created virtual worlds. So obviously that's something that had significance to me, and I will touch on some of the reasons as I go. But I also just want to read it because it has some strange and moving passages that have always affected me deeply, and I think in some ways contributed to some of my fascinations, which I will talk about more as we get going or as I move through the story. So before I do that, before I start then, and as I said, I will not, Johnny, honey, watch out for the wires. Please don't walk on all my wires. As I continue through the story, I will bring up things when they occur to me, and I will read some of the footnotes and things as I go. But before I do that, I will also tell you a little bit about the gentleman who wrote the footnotes, basically, who annotated Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, but in a moment. First, I'm going to check and see if anybody has popped in to say hello. And we will find out. Oh, let me go over to this one here. This one is probably a better one. There we go. Okay, good. So here is Isaac. Excellent. Good to see you, Isaac. Emily Bell. Hello, Emily. Good to see you, too. Mr. Mark Craigbaum. Good to see you, as always, buddy. Tracy McClatchy. Hello, hello. Even to the earringless. Yes, I am still without my earrings. I may have to wait till Deb gets back which is still a couple days away because they're tough ones to put in by myself. It's too bad that none of my dogs have opposable thumbs. Isaac says it's super windy in the valley tonight. Well, I'm not surprised. We've got weird ass weather here. We have had for the last couple of weeks. We went from pouring rain to brilliantly warm, and then back to pouring rain again. And then today is kind of sitting in the middle with intermittent rain. It's actually a bit like being back in England. Anyway, who else is here that I want to say hello to? Barban, hello. Trish Laubacher, good to see you. Kelly Kenrick, pleasure as always. Susan Shamblin, hello. And yes, that is some more of Deborah's beautiful fiber art behind me. I thought it would be much nicer to look at than just the white wall and people's bedroom doors. You don't know, I can't really show it to you without moving a lot of stuff around and including messing with my delicate wires here. Johnny, honey, don't stand on my wires. But we have a very odd house. It was built in the 70s. It's a hexagon, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I believe it's a hexagon. I'm never quite sure because it's broken up a bit on the inside. But most of it is a large open space, and I love it. We do have an octagon right overhead. Not an octagon, sorry. We do have a oculus, is what I was trying to say, directly overhead, which is like a plastic or perspex bubble over the highest part of the house, which is fine unless it's raining. But as you heard last night, if you happen to be tuned in, I don't know how loud it was on this microphone here, but it's really loud. I mean, for the 30-40 seconds at the height of the downpour, I could barely hear what I was saying. So, but I think hopefully the microphone helped direct that so that you could hear me. But anyway, it's not raining at the moment, so that's no worries here. But anyway, I don't remember why I started to explain this. But anyway, we have an oddly shaped house, which I love. And it makes for odd echoes and interesting views. But it is a very misty, weird, kind of Jurassic-looking day out there in the last lights. And I don't think I'm being excessively whiny when I say I am waiting for some warm weather. Not for me. I'm an indoor person. I'm perfectly happy. I was happy in England. But because the dogs, just to get the dogs outside and let them bask in the sun. Anyway, let me go back to saying hello to people. Jim Laubacher, if I didn't say hello, good evening to you too. Christy Sanders says, good evening, y'all. And hello, Mr. Tad. Ron Hyde, dear friend and very important co-contributor to many of the things that have happened with my books in the last 10, 12 years or so. And yes, we will get Mark Craigbaum is talking about Martin Gardner, and we will talk to him about, we will talk about that more in just a moment. Who else is here? Ian T. Williams. Hello, Ian. Glad to have you with us. Let me see. What's the Braulio Valdebenito Maturana. Hello, Braulio. Nice to see you. Ben Maher, checking in from Australia. Pleasure. And it might be Maher. You can pronounce that name many different ways. M-A-H-E-R. Feel free to correct me as to the correct pronunciation. Speaking of our Antipodean friends, there's Tash Joyce. And good to see you, as always, a pleasure. Justine Bax, hello. Nice to have you with us. Tash is checking in from Melbourne with early intermittent rain and early autumn vibes. Dustin Alford, hello, sir. Good to have you. Tim Speckens, as always, pleasure to see you too. Mr. Jeremy Ehrman, hello, Jeremy. Yes, the acoustics. The acoustics are great. I mean, it's a huge space. I mean, it's not huge. It's perfectly normal sized space for the upper floor of a house. But it's a huge space vertically. I think it goes up about 15 feet up to the Oculus up there. So it does have nice acoustics. Felina McNeil, hello, good to see you. Tracy, by the way, Tracy McClatchy checks in to say, yes, it was pretty loud on this end too, impressive, which I assume is referring to last night's rain. Felina, hello, good to see you. And I am also checking in. There's Jay Sheckley waving hello. There's Ricky Gervais. I don't think that's the famous Ricky Gervais, but any Ricky Gervais is certainly welcome here. And he says, "Good evening. I always try to talk people into reading Otherland." Thank you. Very nice. Phil Parkman checking in from, I'm assuming, Los Gatos, since he says first-time caller down the hill. And Ron, VIP status, do I get the upgraded seat? Ron Hyde wants to know. Well, Ron, you're a better judge of that than me because it's going to be another seat in your house. But you have my permission to upgrade because you are a VIP. Okay, so let me check in. Mark mentioned Martin Gardner. Martin Gardner, of course, is the person who edited and put together the annotations of this particular book. I'll read you it says, Martin Gardner was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, attended the University of Chicago, began his writing career as a reporter on the Tulsa Tribune. He is well known for his regular monthly column on recreational mathematics in Scientific American and the Scientific American Book of Mathematical Puzzles and Diversions. He wrote a ton of books himself. He is now shuffled off the mortal coil, I fear, but his legacy was huge. This is Martin Gardner I'm talking about, who annotated this version of Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. Besides being a person who he was a mathematician. He was a puzzle expert, as they mentioned here. He wrote a column for years in Scientific American, which I actually used to read because my dad was a research chemist. And so we always had copies of Scientific American around the house. So because of that and my parents' subscription to Sunset Magazine, which is a magazine particularly aimed at California and the American West, and had all kinds of both things about the natural outdoors and about lifestyle stuff and all that. Very Californian, very 50s and 60s and 70s for me, and in the nicest possible way. But Martin Gardner, besides his work as a reporter and as a writer and as a mathematician and a creator of puzzles, was also fascinated by magic and did a whole lot of stuff with magic, set up various organizations. And I'm talking here magic in the sense of human performed magic. Prestidigitation, sleight of hand is the more common phrase, and all those kinds of things. And he was actually quite well known in that as well, and was friends with a lot of professional magicians and things like that. And somehow out of this melange of different interests and things like that, he became an authority on Lewis Carroll. And of course, Lewis Carroll, as we will probably refer to here and there during the reading of the book, Lewis Carroll was very big on mathematical puzzles and tricks and things like that himself. I will apologize in advance because, as usual, when things get crazy around here, as they have been for the last few weeks, I don't have a lot of time to prep doing these readings. So tonight I will be primarily just reading. If I see something that attracts my attention, I may have to look at the footnote to see if it's worth sharing. But I will do a little bit more checking ahead in the time it takes me to read through the looking glass to make sure that I have picked out some specific tidbits for you that you may find interesting. Last thing before starting. Those of you who have read my work will see not just the specific Otherland things, which we will talk about at some length as we're going, but a lot of other general things that fascinate me as well. I am not Martin Gardner. I am not that level of accomplished in many, many different fields. But the one thing I think I do have in common with Martin Gardner is I get interested in lots of different things. This is one of the reasons that I so enjoyed the Otherland books and still feel in many ways they are the most significant thing I've written. I don't know if that's the right word. I can't say best because I wrote them quite a while back and I've changed in some ways as a writer. But I think certainly in terms of covering the most ground and allowing me to explore the most different possibilities and the most different sides of my own character and writing character, meaning, what I like and do as a writer. I think Otherland was the one that best filled all that. And I will tell you some more Otherland things as we go. But one of the reasons I'm mentioning this now is, of course, the entire theme of this book, which I will not be able to do too many footnotes on tonight because Gardner's footnotes on this stuff are copious, pages long. But Of course, one of the key themes of Through the Looking Glass is mirrors, and mirrors and mirror images of things, and the weird complexity of mirrors, and how they affect our brain and all that are something that has always fascinated me. Anybody, again, who reads my books, you poor buggers, once you slogged through the entire length of them, you will have noticed certain themes that come up again and again. The lost cities thing, that's my fascination with archaeology. And the underground journeys, God knows where that comes from, but it's fascinated me a long time, a long, long time. Probably some terrible experience I had in a collapsing sandcastle as a child. I don't know. But obviously mirrors as well. And in almost all of my books, mirrors have some kind of mystic significance. Not only mirrors, but twins. I'm telling you this, but I didn't even realize any of this stuff myself until I was 20 years into my writing career, where I actually occasionally looked back at my own work instead of just plowing ahead with the next book, and began to see that these themes went all the way back, some of them to Tail Chaser's Song, my very first novel, and have continued on throughout. These are obsessions of mine. These are crotchets or quirks of things that fascinate me. Mirrors, obviously, one of them, the mirrors and the use of the idea of mirrors as a connecting point between one world and another, which of course is what this book is all about, has run all through the Ostenard books, and is of course the Splintered Sun, which is coming out this fall. It takes a fairly major role in that book as well. So just a few things to highlight before we start. So anyway, we are now reading from Lewis Carroll, otherwise known as Reverend Charles Lutwidge Dodson, and the Through the Looking Glass. And we will talk actually as we go. Lewis Carroll has a very, very odd, and sometimes, in some cases, it's sort of disturbing reputation for his interest in children, which is something that should be talked about because it's not quite normal, but I would not be reading this book if there was any evidence that there was ever anything in it other than a kind of a strange fascination with childhood and the innocence of children, but there was never any allegations of anything untoward or impermissible. And in fact, many of his children, including the young woman who was the basis for Alice, spoke very fondly of him all their lives, and certainly long after he was dead, and there was no downside to there was no reason to stay quiet if anything had happened. But we'll talk about that too, because it's an odd part of his entire oeuvre, is the fact that he wrote these stories very specifically for children that he knew. These were friends of his, the children of friends of his, but they were also his friends too, and he certainly cared about them very much. And many of them began as stories that he would tell while they were doing, things together as families, the parents, kids all together with their friend, the Reverend Dodgson, and he would make these stories up and tell them, and people liked them so much they urged him to try and string them together into something like a book, and that was what Alice in Wonderland became. And then this is the sequel, so to speak. Anyway, so, wow, we wasted a lot of time there, and I hardly even talked about Martin Gardner. Chapter 1, Looking Glass House. One thing was certain, that the white kitten had nothing to do with it. It was the black kitten's fault entirely. For the white kitten had been having its face washed by the old cat for the last quarter of an hour, and bearing it pretty well, considering. So you see that it couldn't have had any hand in the mischief. The way Dinah, that's the cat, washed her children's faces was this. First, she held the poor thing down by its ear with one paw, and then with the other paw, she rubbed its face all over, the wrong way, beginning at the nose, and just now, as I said, she was hard at work on the white kitten, which was lying quite still and trying to purr, no doubt feeling that it was all meant for its good. But the black kitten had been finished with earlier in the afternoon, And so, while Alice was sitting curled up in a corner of the great armchair, half talking to herself and half asleep, the kitten had been having a grand game of romps with a ball of worsted Alice had been trying to wind up, and had been rolling it up and down till it had all come undone again. And there it was, spread over the hearthrug, all knots and tangles, with the kitten running after its own tail in the middle. "Oh, you wicked, wicked little thing!" cried Alice, catching up the kitten and giving it a little kiss to make it understand that it was in disgrace. "Really, Dinah ought to have taught you better manners. You ought, Dinah, you know you ought," she added, looking reproachfully at the old cat, and speaking in as cross a voice as she could manage. And then she scrambled back into the armchair, taking the kitten and the worsted with her, and began winding up the ball again. But she didn't get on very fast, as she was talking all the time, sometimes to the kitten and sometimes to herself. Kitty sat very demurely on her knee, pretending to watch the progress of the winding, and now and then putting out one paw and gently touching the ball, as if it would be glad to help if it might. "Do you know what tomorrow is, Kitty?" Alice began. "You'd have guessed if you'd been up in the window with me. Only Dinah was making you tidy, so you couldn't. I was watching the boys getting in sticks for the bonfire, and it wants plenty of sticks, Kitty, only it got so cold and it snowed so they had to leave off. Never mind, Kitty, we'll go and see the bonfire tomorrow." So, clearly it is November, and it is just before Bonfire Night, which is also known as Guy Fawkes, for those of you who are not familiar with the British and Commonwealth customs that came from the attempt to blow up Parliament. Here Alice wound 2 or 3 turns of the worsted round the kitten's neck, just to see how it would look. This led to a scramble, in which the ball rolled down upon the floor again, and yards of it got unwound again. "Do you know, I was so angry, Kitty," Alice went on, as soon as they were comfortably settled again, "when I saw all the mischief you had been doing. I was very nearly opening the window and putting you out into the snow. And you'd have deserved it, you little mischievous darling. What have you got to say for yourself?" "Now, don't interrupt me," she went on, holding up one finger. "I'm going to tell you all your faults. Number 1, you squeaked twice while Dinah was washing your face this morning. Now, you can't deny it, Kitty, I heard you." "What's that you say?" pretending that the kitten was speaking. "Her paw went into your eye? Well, that's your fault for keeping your eyes open. If you'd shut them tight up, it wouldn't have happened. Now, don't make any more excuses, but listen. Number 2, you pulled Snowdrop away by the tail just as I had put down the saucer of milk before her. What, you were thirsty, were you? How do you know she wasn't thirsty, too? Now, for number 3, you unwound every bit of the worsted while I wasn't looking. That's 3 faults, Kitty, and you've not been punished for any of them yet. You know I'm saving up all your punishments for Wednesday week. Suppose they had saved up all my punishments," she went on, talking more to herself than the kitten. "What would they do at the end of a year? I should be sent to prison, I suppose, when the day came. Or, let me see. Suppose each punishment was to be going without a dinner. Then, when the miserable day came, I should have to go without 50 dinners at once. Well, I shouldn't mind that much. I'd far rather go without them than eat them. Do you hear the snow against the window panes, Kitty? How nice and soft it sounds, just as if someone was kissing the window all over outside. I wonder if the snow loves the trees and fields, that it kisses them so gently. And then it covers them up snug, with a white quilt. And perhaps it says, 'Go to sleep, darlings, till the summer comes again.' And when they wake up in the summer, Kitty, they dress themselves all in green and dance about whenever the wind blows." "Oh, that's very pretty," cried Alice, dropping the ball of worsted to clap her hands. "And I do so wish it was true. I'm sure the woods look sleepy in the autumn when the leaves are getting brown. Kitty, can you play chess?" Obviously, another very, very important part of the book. "Kitty, Can you play chess? Now, don't smile, my dear. I'm asking it seriously. Because when we were playing just now, you watched just as if you understood it. And when I said check, you purred. Well, it was a nice check, Kitty, and really I might have won if it hadn't been for that nasty knight that came wriggling down among my pieces. Kitty, dear, let's pretend. And here I wish I could tell you half the things Alice used to say, beginning with her favorite phrase, let's pretend. She had quite a long argument with her sister only the day before, all because Alice had begun with, let's pretend we're kings and queens. Becoming a king and queen, there's another significant subject of this book. And her sister, who liked being very exact, had argued that they couldn't because there were only two of them. And Alice had been reduced at last to say, well, you can be one of them then, and I'll be all the rest. And once she had really frightened her own nurse, her old nurse, by shouting suddenly in her ear, Nurse, do let's pretend that I'm a hungry hyena and you're a bone. But this is taking us away from Alice's speech to the kittens. To the kitten. Let's pretend that you're the Red Queen, Kitty. Do you know, I think if you sat up and folded your arms, you'd look exactly like her. Now, do try, there's a dear. And Alice got the Red Queen off the table and set it up before the kitten as a model for it to imitate. However, the thing didn't succeed, principally, Alice said, because the kitten wouldn't fold its arms properly. So, to punish it, she held it up to the looking-glass that it might see how sulky it was. And if you're not good directly, she added, I'll put you through into Looking-Glass House. How would you like that? Now, if you'll only attend, Kitty, and not talk so much, I'll tell you all my ideas about Looking-Glass House. First, there's the room you can see through the glass. That's just the same as our drawing room, only the things go the other way. I can see all of it when I get upon a chair, all but the bit just behind the fireplace. Oh, I do so wish I could see that bit. I want so much to know whether they've a fire in the winter. You never can tell, you know, unless our fire smokes, and then smoke comes up in that room too. But that may be only pretense, just to make it look as if they had a fire. Well then, the books are something like our books, only the words go the wrong way. I know that because I've held up one of our books to the glass, and then they hold up one in the other room. How would you like to live in Looking-Glass House, Kitty? I wonder if they'd give you milk in there. Perhaps Looking-Glass milk isn't good to drink. And here is a long, long section of footnotes from Martin Gardner that I will not read because they are too long. As a matter of fact, they're as long as the chapter itself. But interesting in that one of the things Martin Gardner talks about here is that the, what's it called, the ISO, anyway, that it was not known, obviously, not until fairly recently, that there are actually such a thing as mirror image molecules, and that mirror image molecules, if you were to have them in your body, would not work properly. And so the idea here is that Gardner is sharing is that, yes, in fact, Looking-Glass milk would be very bad for you because it would be backward and the molecules would not do the things they were supposed to do inside your body. And goodness only knows what they would do. Oh, you can see just a little peep of the passage in Looking-Glass House if you leave the door of our drawing room wide open. And it's very like our passage as far as you can see, only you know it may be quite different on beyond. Oh, Kitty, how nice it would be if we could only get through into Looking-Glass House. I'm sure it's got, oh, such beautiful things in it. Let's pretend there's a way of getting through into it somehow, Kitty. Let's pretend the glass has got all soft like gauze so that we can get through. Why, it's turning into a sort of mist now, I declare. It'll be easy enough to get through. She was up on the chimney piece while she said this, though she hardly knew how she had got there. And certainly the glass was beginning to melt away, just like a bright silvery mist. The one thing I will not properly be able to show you are all the wonderful Tennille illustrations. John Tennille, who did the illustrations for the original Alice books. But here's one of Alice both approaching the mirror from one side and then coming out on the other side. And certainly the glass was beginning to melt away, just like a bright silvery mist. By the way, there's an unconscious, on my part, an unconscious reference to how things happen in the Otherland books when the characters travel from one virtual world to another, very much like this in Alice in Wonderland. I wasn't specifically thinking of it at the time, but I'm sure that I subconsciously stole the heck out of it. In another moment, Alice was through the glass and had jumped lightly down into the looking-glass room. The very first thing she did was to look whether there was a fire in the fireplace, and she was quite pleased to find that there was a real one, blazing away as brightly as the one she had left behind. "So, I shall be as warm here as I was in the old room," thought Alice. "Warmer, in fact, because there'll be no one here to scold me away from the fire. Oh, what fun it'll be when they see me through the glass in here and can't get at me." Then she began looking about and noticed that what could be seen from the old room was quite common and uninteresting, but that all the rest was as different as possible. For instance, the pictures on the wall next the fire seemed to be all alive, and the very clock on the chimney-piece, you know you can only see the back of it in the looking-glass, had got the face of a little old man and grinned at her. "They don't keep this room so tidy as the other," Alice thought to herself as she noticed several of the chessmen down in the hearth among the cinders. But in another moment, with a little "oh" of surprise, she was down on her hands and knees watching them. The chessmen were walking about, 2 and 2. "Here are the Red King and the Red Queen," Alice said in a whisper, for fear of frightening them. "And there are the White King and the White Queen sitting on the edge of the shovel. And here are, whoops, let me figure out how to get that up there so we can see it. There are the Red King and the Red Queen. And here are 2 castles walking arm in arm. I don't think they can hear me," she went on as she put her head closer down, "and I'm nearly sure they can't see me. I feel somehow as if I was getting invisible." Here, something began squeaking on the table behind Alice and made her turn her head just in time to see one of the white pawns roll over and begin kicking. She watched it with great curiosity to see what would happen next. "It is the voice of my child," the White Queen cried out as she rushed past the king so violently that she knocked him over among the cinders. "My precious Lily, my imperial kitten," and she began scrambling wildly up the side of the fender. "Imperial fiddlestick," said the king, rubbing his nose, which had been hurt by the fall. He had a right to be a little annoyed with the queen, for he was covered with ashes from head to foot. Alice was very anxious to be of use, and as the poor little Lily was nearly screaming herself into a fit, she hastily picked up the queen and set her on the table by the side of her noisy little daughter. The queen gasped and sat down. The rapid journey through the air had quite taken away her breath, and for a minute or two she could do nothing but hug the little Lily in silence. As soon as she had recovered her breath a little, she called out to the White King, who was sitting sulkily among the ashes, "Mind the volcano?" "What volcano?" said the king, looking up anxiously into the fire, as if he thought that was the most likely place to find one. "Blew me up," panted the queen, who was still a little out of breath. "Mind you come up the regular way. Don't get blown up." Alice watched the White King as he so slowly struggled up from bar to bar, till at last she said, "Oh, well, you'll be hours and hours getting up to the table at that rate. I'd far better help you, hadn't I?" But the king took no notice of the question. It was quite clear that he could neither see nor hear her. So Alice picked him up very gently and lifted him across more slowly than she had lifted the queen, that she mightn't take his breath away. But before she put him on the table, she thought she might as well dust him a little. He was so covered in ashes. And there is Tennille's wonderful drawing of the White King. Oh, why won't we focus? Focus! Focus! Oh, well. I can see that's not going to work. She said afterwards that she had never seen in all her life a face as the king made when he found himself held in the air by an invisible hand and being dusted. He was far too much astonished to cry out, but his eyes and his mouth went on getting larger and larger and rounder, till her hand shook so with laughing that she nearly let him drop upon the floor. "Oh, please don't make such faces, my dear," she cried out, quite forgetting that the king couldn't hear her. "You make me laugh so that I can hardly hold you. And don't keep your mouth so wide open. All the ashes will get into it. There now, I think you're tidy enough," she added as she smoothed his hair and set him upon the table near the queen. The king immediately fell flat on his back and lay perfectly still, and Alice was a little alarmed at what she had done and went round the room to see if she could find any water to throw over him. However, she could find nothing but a bottle of ink, and when she got back with it, she found he had recovered, and he and the queen were talking together in a frightened whisper, so low that Alice could hardly hear what they said. The king was saying, I assure you, my dear, I turned cold to the very ends of my whiskers." To which the queen replied, "You haven't got any whiskers." "The horror of that moment," the king went on, "I shall never forget." "You will, though," the queen said, "if you don't make a memorandum out of it." Alice looked on with great interest as the king took an enormous memorandum book out of his pocket and began writing. A sudden thought struck her, and she took hold of the end of the pencil, which came some way over his shoulder, and began writing for him. The poor king looked puzzled and unhappy and struggled with the pencil for some time without saying anything, but Alice was too strong for him, and at last he panted out, "My dear, I really must get a thinner pencil. I can't manage this one a bit. It writes all manner of things that I don't attend." "What manner of things?" said the queen, looking over the book, in which Alice had put, "The White Knight is sliding down the poker. He balances very badly." "That's not a memorandum of your feelings." There was a book lying near Alice on the table, and while she sat watching the White King, for she was still a little anxious about him and had the ink all ready to throw over him in case he fainted again, she turned over the leaves to find some part that she could read. "For it's all in some language I don't know," she said to herself. It was like this, and it's the first line, first quatrain of Jabberwocky and title, but it's all backwards. She puzzled over this for some time, but at last a bright thought struck her. "Why, it's a looking-glass book, of course, and if I hold it up to a glass, the words will go all the right way again." This was the poem that Alice read, and obviously this is also significant to the Otherland section that had the through the looking glass world in it. Jabberwocky. "'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the momraths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch." He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the tumtum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. When hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy, O frabjous day, Callooh, Calais, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe. It seems very pretty, she said when she had finished it, but it's rather hard to understand. You see, she didn't like to confess, even to herself, that she couldn't make it out at all. Somehow it seems to fill my head with ideas, only I don't exactly know what they are. However, somebody killed something, that's clear, at any rate. But oh, thought Alice, suddenly jumping up, if I don't make haste, I shall have to go back through the looking-glass before I've seen what the rest of the house is like. Let's have a look at the garden first. She was out of the room in a moment and ran down the stairs, or at least it wasn't exactly running, but a new invention for getting downstairs quickly and easily, as Alice said to herself. She just kept the tips of her fingers on the handrail and floated gently down without even touching the stairs with her feet. Then she floated on through the hall and would have gone straight out at the door in the same way if she hadn't caught hold of the doorpost. She was getting a little giddy with so much floating in the air and was rather glad to find herself walking again in the natural way. Now, just briefly, of course, here is the rather famous Tenniel illustration of the Jabberwocky. There it is, clicked into place, and the Beamish Boy and his Vorpal sword. Interestingly to me about this passage is that one of the things that Carroll seems to be dealing with here, and something that I deal with all the time in my own fiction, is if this is a sort of dream, which of course it is, because as we already learned from Alice in Wonderland, that entire adventure was, quote, a dream, unquote, that she woke up from at the very end when the cards all rose up and attacked her in the courtroom where she had been accused of stealing the tarts. But one of the things I always work with and spend a lot of time working with is the actual mechanics of how to operate in a dream world. Because oftentimes so many of the things in my book take place in these sort of outside realms, these other versions of a looking glass world, these either the dream road or in the interstitial parts of the Otherland universe between the things that were created by humans and the things that have been created out of the reality of the Otherland network itself. And one of the things that you always think about is, well, what happens in a dream? How do you move around in dreams? Are you conscious of yourself and your body? And here in Through the Looking Glass, Carroll has Alice discover that she can basically kind of float down the stairs as long as she keeps her hand on the handrail. And it works so effectively that she almost slides right on out before she catches the baluster or whatever and prevents herself, which is, I think, an interesting comment on trying to personify or embody the perception that one has of oneself in a dream. In the same way that, say, not only are you sometimes not conscious of moving in the physical sense, you don't feel like you're walking or running, or you just are making that movement and you are going from one place to another. And in the same sense, you will often find yourself in new places without a conscious, obviously since you're dreaming, but without a conscious knowledge of transitioning from one place to another. And that, of course, happens quite a bit in this book, as we shall see further on. Chapter 2, The Garden of Live Flowers. I should see the garden far better, said Alice to herself, if I could get to the top of that hill. And here's a path that leads straight to it. At least, no, it doesn't do that, after going a few yards along the path and turning several sharp corners. But I suppose it will at last. But how curiously it twists. It's more like a corkscrew than a path. Well, this turn goes to the hill, I suppose. No, it doesn't. This goes straight back to the house. Well, then, I'll try it the other way. And so she did. There's Lemon dropping deer antler in protest. And so she did, wandering up and down and trying turn after turn, but always coming back to the house, do what she would. Indeed, once, when she turned a corner rather more quickly than usual, she ran against it before she could stop herself. "It's no use talking about it," Alice said, looking up at the house and pretending it was arguing with her. "I'm not going in again yet. I know I should have to get through the looking glass again, back into the old room, and there'd be an end to all my adventures." So, resolutely turning her back upon the house, she set out once more down the path, determined to keep straight on till she got to the hill. For a few minutes all went well, and she was just saying, "I really shall do it this time," when the path gave a sudden twist and shook itself, as she described it afterwards, and the next moment she found herself actually walking in at the door. "Oh, it's too bad," she cried. "I never saw such a house for getting in the way. Never." However, there was the hill, full in sight, so there was nothing to be done but start again. This time she came upon a large flower bed with a border of daisies and a willow tree growing in the middle. "Oh, Tiger Lily," said Alice, addressing herself to one that was waving gracefully about in the wind, "I wish you could talk." "We can talk," said the Tiger Lily, "when there's anybody worth talking to." Alice was so astonished that she couldn't speak for a minute. It quite seemed to take her breath away. At length, as the Tiger Lily only went on waving about, she spoke again in a timid voice, almost a whisper. "And can all the flowers talk?" "As well as you can," said the Tiger Lily, "and a great deal louder." "It isn't manners for us to begin, you know," said the Rose, "and I really was wondering when you'd speak. Said I to myself, her face has got some sense in it, though it's not a clever one. Still, you're the right color, and that goes a long way." "I don't care about the color," the Tiger Lily remarked. "If only her petals curled up a little more, she'd be all right." Alice didn't like being criticized, so she began asking questions. "Aren't you sometimes frightened at being planted out here, with nobody to take care of you?" "There's the tree in the middle," said the Rose. "What else is it good for?" "But what could it do if any danger came?" Alice asked. "It could bark," said the Rose. "It says bow wow," cried a daisy. "That's why its branches are called boughs." "Didn't you know that?" cried another daisy. And here they all began shouting together till the air seemed quite full of little shrill voices. By the way, in case you haven't noticed, I'm sure you have if you've ever read these books before, one of the ways that Carroll was entertaining in his original stories was with terrible puns, which were not quite as well known a form of, well, I suppose they were, but they were not quite as despised a form of humor, certainly not for children. And so the puns like bark and bow wow and things like that were very much meant to make children giggle. Where were we? "Oh, silence, every one of you," cried the Tiger Lily, waving itself passionately from side to side and trembling with excitement. "They know I can't get at them," it panted, bending its quivering head towards Alice, "or they wouldn't dare do it." "Never mind," Alice said in a soothing tone, and stooping down to the daisies, who were just beginning again, she whispered, "If you don't hold your tongues, I'll pick you." There was silence in a moment, and several of the pink daisies turned white. "That's right," said the Tiger Lily. "The daisies are the worst of all. When one speaks, they all begin together, and it's enough to make one wither to hear the way they go on." "How is it you can all talk so nicely?" Alice said, hoping to get into a better temper by a compliment. "I've been in many gardens before, but none of the flowers could talk." "Put your hand down and feel the ground," said the Tiger Lily. "Then you'll know why." Hello, Lem-Lem. Alice did so. It's very hard, she said, but I don't see what that has to do with it. In most gardens, yes, here's Lemon. Okay, sweetie, I see you. Yes, you're a good girl. Can I go on reading, please? Yes, you're a good girl. You are a very fine dog. Yes, but you cannot get into my lap when I'm trying to read. And you cannot bite the microphone either. Go on, sweetie. Hop down. Good girl. Alice did so. It's very hard, she said, but I don't see what that has to do with it. In most gardens, the tiger lily said, they make the beds too soft so that the flowers are always asleep. This sounded a very good reason, and Alice was quite pleased to know it. I never thought of that before, she said. It's my opinion that you never think at all, the rose said in a rather severe tone. I never saw anybody that looked stupider, a violet said, so suddenly that Alice quite jumped, for it hadn't spoken before. Hold your tongue, cried the tiger lily, as if you ever saw anybody. You keep your head under the leaves and move away there, snore away there, till you know no more what's going on in the world than if you were a bud. Are there any more people in the garden besides me? Alice said, not choosing to notice the rose's last remark. There's one other flower in the garden that can move about like you, said the rose. I wonder how you do it. You're always wondering, said the tiger lily. But she's more bushy than you are. Is she like me? Alice asked eagerly, for the thought crossed her mind. There's another little girl in the garden somewhere. Well, she has the same awkward shape as you, the rose said, but she's redder, and her petals are shorter, I think. They're done up close like a dahlia, said the tiger lily, not tumbled about like yours. But that's not your fault, the rose added kindly. You're beginning to fade, you know, and then one can't help one's petals getting a little untidy. Alice didn't like this idea at all. So, to change the subject, she asked, Does she ever come out here? I dare say you'll see her soon, said the rose. She's one of the kind that has 9 spikes, you know. Where does she wear them? Alice asked with some curiosity. Why, all round her head, of course, the rose replied. I was wondering you hadn't got some too. I thought it was the regular rule. She's coming, cried the larkspur. I hear her footstep, thump, thump, along the gravel walk. Alice looked round eagerly and found that it was the Red Queen. She's grown a good deal, was her first remark. She had indeed. When Alice first found her in the ashes, she had been only 3 inches high, and here she was, half a head taller than Alice herself. It's the fresh air that does it, said the rose. Wonderfully fine air it is out here. I think I'll go and meet her, said Alice, for though the flowers were interesting enough, she felt that it would be far grander to have a talk with a real queen. You can't possibly do that, said the rose. I should advise you to walk the other way. This sounded nonsense to Alice, so she said nothing, but set off at once towards the Red Queen. To her surprise, she lost sight of her in a moment, and found herself walking in at the front door again. A little provoked, she drew back, and after looking everywhere for the Queen, whom she spied out at last a long way off, she thought she would try the plan this time of walking in the opposite direction. It succeeded beautifully. She had not been walking a minute before she found herself face to face with the Red Queen, and full in sight of the hill she had been so long aiming at. Where do you come from? Said the Red Queen, and where are you going? Look up, speak nicely, and don't twiddle your fingers all the time. And here, if we can get a shot of it, is Tennille's version of the Red Queen. but it doesn't want to focus on it now for some reason. Focus, focus, focus. No, these cameras are shy. And where are you going? Look up, speak nicely, and don't twiddle your fingers all the time. Alice attended to all these directions and explained as well as she could that she had lost her way. I don't know what you mean by your way, said the Queen. All the ways about here belong to me. But why did you come out here at all? She added in a kinder tone. Curtsy while you're thinking what to say. It saves time. Alice wondered a little at this, but she was too much in awe of the Queen to disbelieve it. I'll try it when I go home, she thought to herself. The next time I'm a little late for dinner. It's time for you to answer now, the Queen said, looking at her watch. Open your mouth a little wider when you speak, and always say, Your Majesty. I only wanted to see what the garden was like, Your Majesty. That's right, said the Queen, patting her on the head, which Alice didn't like at all. Though when you say garden, I've seen gardens compared with which this would be a wilderness. Alice didn't dare to argue the point, but went on, and I thought I'd try and find my way to the top of that hill. When you say hill, the Queen interrupted, I could show you hills in comparison with which you'd call that a valley. No, I shouldn't, said Alice, surprised into contradicting her at last. A hill can't be a valley, you know. That would be nonsense. The Red Queen shook her head. You may call it nonsense, if you like, she said, but I've heard nonsense, compared with which that would be as sensible as a dictionary. Alice curtsied again, as she was afraid from the Queen's tone that she was a little offended, and they walked on in silence till they got to the top of the little hill. For some minutes Alice stood without speaking, looking out in all directions over the country, and a most curious country it was. There were a number of tiny little brooks running straight across it from side to side, and the ground between was divided up into squares by a number of little green hedges that reached from brook to brook. I declare it's marked out just like a large chessboard, Alice said at last. There ought to be some men moving about somewhere. And so there are, she added in a tone of delight, and her heart began to beat quick with excitement as she went on. It's a great, huge game of chess that's being played all over the world. If this is the world at all, you know. Oh, what fun it is. How I wish I was one of them. I wouldn't mind being a pawn if only I might join, though of course I should like to be a queen best. She glanced rather shyly at the real Queen as she said this, but her companion only smiled pleasantly and said, That's easily managed. You can be the White Queen's pawn, if you like, as Lily's too young to play, and you're in the second square to begin with. When you get to the 8th square, you'll be a queen. Just at this moment, somehow or other, they began to run. Alice never could quite make out, in thinking it over afterwards, how it was that they began. All she remembers is that they were running hand in hand, and the Queen went so fast that it was all she could do to keep up with her. And still the Queen kept crying, Faster, faster! But Alice felt she could not go faster, though she had no breath left to say so. The most curious part of the thing was that the trees and the other things round them never changed their places at all, however fast they went. They never seemed to pass anything. I wonder if all the things move along with us, thought poor, puzzled Alice. And the Queen seemed to guess her thoughts, for she cried, Faster! Don't try to talk! Not that Alice had any idea of doing that. She felt as if she would never be able to talk again. She was getting so much out of breath, and still the Queen cried, Faster, faster, and dragged her along. Are we nearly there? Alice managed to pant out at last. Nearly there? The Queen repeated. Why, we passed it 10 minutes ago. Faster! And they ran on for a time in silence, with the wind whistling in Alice's ears and almost blowing her hair off her head, she fancied. And that's where we're going to stop until we return, presumably next week, for more adventures through the looking glass. As you may have noticed there, that is obviously another theme. Mirrors, obviously one big one, and chess, another big one. All of which, of course, I stole like crazy and rolled into the Otherland simulation of the looking glass world. But it is now time for me to shuffle off to Buffalo and go back to my dog sitting duties. So I thank you all. It's been such a pleasure to spend some time with you, and say goodbye to the upstairs room, because by next week I will almost certainly have moved back downstairs again. There will be no more dog cameos. Sorry, John. I know you'd like to appear also, but you don't stand up as well as you used to. Until that time, I want you all to take good care of yourselves. I want you to take good care of your loved ones, family, friends, all that stuff. Keep an eye out for others who might need a little help here or there, because it's a complicated and sometimes difficult and upsetting world out there, and we all need a little help sometimes, all of us, because we humans are social animals, and even a kind word can be a form of help. So please do that. Be aware, keep an eye out for others, and especially be well and take care of yourself. Peace. I will see you very soon, and grazie amici.